Dear students, today I am going to discuss with you Imtiaz Dharker's poem Pardah 2. But before we begin with the poem, in order to understand her views regarding this system, it is necessary to have some idea of this tradition in Muslim society. This community regards the home to be the proper place of the woman. She is the mistress of the house, or say the homemaker, or the wife and mother's role is perfect for her according to them. Whereas the man is the protector and the provider in the family, and his role carries authority and higher status. If we trace the history of Pardah system, we find that it must have been necessary in the early days of Islam in the Arabic region, where there was constant strife and turmoil among the various tribes. And therefore, it was meant to keep the women safe from harassment. It brought about the segregation of the women, but it also implied high family status. In many parts of India, between the ages of 5 and 9 years, girls in Muslim families start getting training in adult behavior, and several restrictions are placed on them, which are a prelude to much greater segregation from the menfolk. This is referred to as Purdah Mebhitana. In many families, between the ages of 9 years and 16 years, all the girls of the family are sent to the Janan Khana. So the Pardah, we can say, is an instrument of masculine effort to keep low the spirit of independence in women. The Pardah, covering a woman's face and body, had a tremendous influence on a Muslim woman's life. It not only secluded her physically, but also mentally from the rest of the world, reducing her entire world to the angan, means the courtyard, and say there is a word dalan, or we can say the Janan Khana. So women of every generation, bound in the constraints of the Pardah and subjected to its tyranny, have ironically contributed to the perpetration of Pardah with its inhibiting effects. Imtiaz Dharker's Pardah 2 is a poem about many women, and all merge into one. They all serve the same servitude: physical, psychological, social, and cultural. Those who try to break cover with the hope and dream of a free new world face uncertainty and suffer excommunication. So this poem, Pardah 2, is an undaunted criticism of the way the society works against the freedom, dignity, will, and choice of women even in alien land. And here the setting of the poem is England. And the poem brings out issues relating to Muslim women living in England. At the beginning of the poem, she accepts that the faith represented by Allahu Akbar, the call of the Azan, offers solace and is reassuring in a foreign land. She writes, I quote, In the tin box of your memory, a coin of comfort rattles against the strangeness of a foreign land. So here the image of a coin rattle is very effective, or say apt. The sound of a coin in a box is reassuring. In the tin box of your memory, she is using a metaphor here. Similarly, the call of Allahu Akbar is reassuring in a foreign land, providing a sense of security and belongingness, even though it evokes routine responses. Then in stanzas 2nd and 3rd, the poetess criticizes the traditional kind of education received by Muslim girls, which focuses on religion and does not give them knowledge. In the description, the narrator says that words of the holy book were repeated mechanically and parrot-like. The children did not worry about the meaning. They were not bothered about the meaning at all. They just repeat them mechanically. And the rhythm of the words was enough for them, as their bodies rocked to and fro, giving them a sense of community and belonging. Then the rules of decorum, which form a part of traditional education, fail to curb the surging urges of youth. Rules forbid men to look at and admire a woman's beauty. If a man happens to see a beautiful face, he should turn away his look. Men and women should keep their eyes lowered. Men should not look steadily at a woman's face. But the young Haji does not seem to be influenced by such teachings. In the poem, Imtiaz Dharker writes about a young Haji, and he does not seem to be influenced by such teachings, nor is he purified by his pilgrimage, although he has gone for a Hajj. He, this boy, 15 years of age, looks at the girl with nothing holy in his look and expresses his attraction towards her. Dharker writes, I quote, "There was nothing holy in his look. Hands that had prayed at Makkah dropped a sly flower on your book." The word sly suggests the intention to seduce. The girl's reaction is a natural one. Her dreams were full of him for days. She responded to the attraction and her physical urges, allowing her thoughts to be impure, burning in the heat of love. She, unmindful of the punishment that would fall on her on the day of judgment. She writes, Dharker writes, "You were scorched long before the judgment by the blaze." You were scorched means she was burning, but burning with what? With the physical urge, the heat of love, long before the judgment by the blaze. The pronoun you could refer to the poetess herself or could have a more general meaning, that is, anyone, any woman, any girl. The girl has no freedom to have a relationship of her choice. What lies in store for her? Then she gives an example of Evelyn, a girl from Brighton, tells her is a traditional marriage, the nature of which is suggested through the image of the red fabric, the dress which she wears at the time of her marriage. Dharker writes, I quote, "A stretch of brilliant fabric, red, yes, crimson red, patterned through with golden thread." Unquote. The Pardah system allows girls no expression of individuality or say personality, and they are married in the traditional manner with the promise of a meher. The money, meher is the money, assured or given to a girl as a security against divorce or the misfortunes of widowhood. Dharker refers sarcastically to such conventional marriages involving a monetary transaction but no real exercise of individual choice. She writes, they have been sold and bought, the girls I knew. Then the constraints of the Pardah and their destruction of the individual's thinking and intelligence are referred to sarcastically again by her, and she writes, unwilling virgins who had been taught, especially in this stranger's land, to bind their brightness tightly round whatever they might wear in the Pardah of the mind. The Pardah is literal in the form of a burqa or chadar, but it is also a curtain around the intellect of a person. The girls described by the narrator kept their eyes lowered and dressed in a manner which concealed their physical charms according to the dictates of the religious norms of the community. The girls were able to resist the temptation of alien hands, the young Englishman around them. Because of the dictates of the man in the history of their religion, the religious leaders and the elders in their lives, guided by the religious teachings they had received, they married within their race and lived in accordance with the principles laid down by religious leaders. They did not marry to make themselves happy, but to please them, the people or their family, or say the husband. Dharker writes, night after virtuous night you performed for them, for your husbands. They derive solace, a coin of comfort, from the fact that they have adhered to the norms of their religion, though such a marriage might mean unhappy lives, years of loss. They were losing their lives. They were losing their years of their lives. The religious books tell the young people of the severe punishments laid down for moral transgressions, of the scourge and stones to save them from impurity. And these are particularly severe for women. In this poem, Pardah 2, Dharker expresses the futility in the lives of Muslim women in Britain. Even rebellion against the norms of the community is futile. This is brought out through examples of two girls, Salima and Naseem. Salima falls in love with an Englishman, yet since her faith prohibits marriage with a non-Muslim, she marries within her community and has annual babies. Dharker here refers with irony to the prohibition on the use of she tells about Salima, who rebels, divorces, marries again, and becomes a typical subservient wife like a mother, begging approval from the rest. Her life and the life of others like her is a bondage and a burden, and she feels as though she is a prey of the system, never independent, never strong. Dharker suggests this through a simile comparing her to a wounded animal. She writes, watchful as any creature that lifts its head and sniffs the air only to scent its own small trail of blood. The fate of Muslim girls rebelling against the dictates of their society, they are also unhappy. If a Muslim girl, she gives example of Naseem, marries an Englishman, she is given up by her family. The poet says with her characteristic irony, I quote, the table is laden at Muharram, and you are remembered among the dead. No going back, the prayers said. Naseem is completely at the mercy of the English boy who promised her freedom, and ironically she has to be on her knees always to him, trying to smile and be accepted. According to Dharker, Naseem's elopement brought, in her poem she writes that Naseem's elopement brought shame and disgrace to the family, and she was remembered among the dead at Muharram. Her encounter with the English boy brought to her a promise of freedom. And still, these women, whether Salima or Naseem, they are behind the veil and are always on their knees. Muslim girls in Britain remain in or out of Pardah, that is, whether they abide by the orthodox ways or rebel. As she has quoted two examples, one of Salima, who surrenders, and the other one is Naseem, who revolts. But then what happened? Their fate is miserable, involving abject surrender because they are not educated enough to be independent. Thus, we see that this poem is a marvelous modern poem of a living Indian English poetic genius who herein shows the undaunted conviction and revolt against a highly sensitive and explosive issue pertaining to the emancipation of women from a society with deep-rooted conservatism. So that's all about this poem, students. I hope the poem is clear to you. Thank you.